Hey, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today we have Kory. He's an experiencer who believes he's been experiencing abductions since he was a child. So, Kory, thank you very much for coming on with us. And as usual, I usually ask just start from the beginning, from when you were a kid, what you remember. And yeah, please let us hear your experiences.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me and for doing this. I appreciate it. So yeah, my name's Kory Ponting. I recently learned I was an experiencer probably within the past year or so, I would say. Kind of the puzzles finally started to fit together because I didn't really think anything of it at the time. Most of these things I just thought were unusual, and it wasn't until I read a book titled Abductions, Humans Encounters with Aliens, written by Dr. Mack. We've talked about this prior to this interview, but the short version is that when I was reading through this book, it kind of opened my eyes in a way to, oh crap, this is actually happening to me, and it has happened to me. And the more I thought about it, the more these strange things started to make a lot more sense.
So real quick,
Mhm.
so it's only been about a year since you really came to the realization after reading the book, but it opened up a doorway of your life, of
Yes.
things happening. And throughout your life, you just kind of pushed it away and said, oh, that was, what did you say to yourself about all the other experiences?
When I didn't know, or after I knew?
When you, when you didn't know, yes. When you didn't know,
So
how
when I
did you?
didn't know, yeah. So most of them, the big thing, and this is another one for any of those watching that are like, am I an experiencer? The book outlines a lot of good common symptoms. The biggest one for me is missing time, which would be you're, let's say, out having a barbecue, and then you blink and you're standing out in a field 4 hours later. Something like that would be a good indicator of either you have narcolepsy and you fell asleep and somehow ended up in a field, or something happened. It's a very common trait. It's a very common symptom of abductions, and there's a ton other that the book outlines.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time of these incidents, they were mostly me waking up in unusual circumstances that I thought was, this is weird. I've had sleeping problems. Well, I've had difficulty sleeping pretty much my entire life, which is another trait, but specifically having anxiety to deal with places you sleep, which is not that uncommon. A lot of people have this, but it's specifically only flaring up when you go down in bed and your anxiety starts to raise.
And you believe that throughout your life, the sleeping issues have been because of abductions, possibly, or just regular?
It got really bad. Within that past year, I started pursuing, like, what is causing this? I was working with my therapist to try to figure it out. And it wasn't until I browsed through this book that I was like, oh, there it is. I've been getting abducted my whole life. So my subconscious is saying invaders when I lay down at bed.
Real quick about your therapist. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Was your therapist one that knew about UFO abductions, or did they not believe it? Or okay.
No, they know nothing of it. I actually came to this conclusion on my own.
And okay, and you didn't apparently know anything about it yourself until a year ago. So I'm guessing you were going to a therapist before that as well.
Yeah. This has been an ongoing issue that I've been working at for a while. I'm much better now. I'm basically fine now, but at the time it was a struggle to just fall asleep, and I didn't know why. And ever since then, and we mentioned this before we started about just coming to terms and accepting with what's happening, but that's a little bit more forward than the stuff that we're talking about right now. So at the time, it was just unusual. And even back then, I wasn't really having trouble sleeping. I wasn't having anxiety while sleeping. I just thought I've always been difficult to go to sleep, but when I'm out, I'm out. And the there were just too many weird times where I woke up in just peculiar, very unusual circumstances. And it's usually in scenarios where I'm alone somewhere and isolated, which is another common thing. Gaps in time when you're isolated is a good indicator, on top of like other things. Fear of darkness, having like shown a picture of a gray and have it basically be triggering. Like I was terrified as a kid. I was fine with like the Alien movies as a kid, but when I saw like Close Encounter of, what is it called? Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind?
Third kind? Or are you talking about
I can't. It was a Spielberg movie.
Yeah, Close Encounters.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, that movie terrified me as a child.
Wow.
Straight
that
up.
One doesn't. That one didn't even show any grays until like the very, very end too.
Yeah. It was just. It was the fact that I guess they held it back, and everything was just terrifying to me as a child.
Up the whole time.
Which is weird because like something like Aliens, I'm like, yeah, that's a guy in a suit, but seeing grays represented freaks me the heck out as a child.
Sometimes even like saucers as well, and it's really interesting you mentioned that. I had the same exact thing for me as a child. I could watch like Men in Black, like those type of extraterrestrials, but the second it's actually like a realistic one.
Right. Yeah. Another thing that caught my eye when I was a kid was when I first saw Star Wars. In the cantina scene, there's like two aliens in the background that just so happen to look kind of like grays. They're not gray, they're like tan, but they have the same kind of shaped head and everything. And that, like, out of everything that's going on in that scene, my eyes focus on those two, and I was immediately like,
all right, I'm gonna have to put that picture
in my
up.
Bones.
I'll put the picture up for people to see. You can.
It's one of those like, if you know, kind of things, and that's a kind of a common indicator that maybe it's associated with the grays. It seems to be.
I was going to say a lot of people say that super soldiers and others in particular, insiders say that lots of movies for the last 40 years have been soft disclosures for us to get us used to it.
Yes, there's actually quite a few sci-fi books based on that exact same principle that they've been. Some people would even say like video games and movies, basically media in general has been slow rolling us into a form of acceptance, which merits an argument. It would make sense, but at the same time you would probably think like maybe someone from a studio would be like, yeah, the government told us about this totally, here's the document.
That's what gets me. It's like, you wouldn't think unless they just slipped someone in that was an assistant to the screenwriter or whatever, and they just like slip them idea.
I think the topic has enough motor of itself selling things that it would make sense in a commercial market, that it would kind of self-propagate it. But at the same time, it does bear a good argument, I would say.
But I'm sorry, we're getting off topic. But so triggers. So
triggers.
So triggers. Star Wars was the kind of trigger for you when you saw the aliens in the bar. Yeah,
and it's just stuff like that. But I always thought there are other things too. Like I have a quirk or whatever you want to call it, called sensory defensiveness, and I've had this basically my entire life. Anytime I recoil to physical sensations. So imagine if you had like a Jolly Rancher that was sticky in your hand. I wouldn't be able to have a conversation if I had that tactile feeling. It's triggering in a sense to me.
Is that one of your triggers?
Yeah. Sticky things drive me absolutely nuts. Anyone knows me knows that there's certain things about me like that, like physical stimuli. Like I can't fall asleep in an embrace with someone. I can't have any kind of external physical stimuli because it's not relaxing to me. In a sense that it's like I wish I could fall asleep like that, but I can't. I usually have to have like separate blankets. I have to have all my physical stimuli, if I'm trying to relax, be separate and isolated. Which if you look up sensory defensiveness in Wikipedia, it's usually trauma-induced of some kind, which I have no recollection. My parents are excellent parents. I don't recall anything ever happening to me that caused me to be so recoiled to physical stimuli, which is it's a very unusual trait.
All your life, right?
Heard of it, but yeah, I've been like this. Like the first time I realized it was kind of weird was when I was scared during a thunderstorm at night, and I begged my mom, please sleep in the bed with me, as a very small child. She hops in bed and she immediately falls asleep, and I can't sleep. I have to wake my mom up and be like, hey mom, I'm good now, you can go. She's just like, kids, man, but it's true. Yeah, basically, as long as I can remember, I've been like that. But there's other symptoms, fear of needles. There's a lot of different traits that, maybe one by itself is kind of but it seems to be very common among experiencers to have all of these things to a degree. But like and I've had experiences happen to me pretty much my entire life, but the only ones that I know surefire are like the gaps in time, because like I wasn't accounted for during this period, or some unusual circumstances happened that.
How often did that happen?
Well, looking back on it's hard to tell. It seemed more prevalent when I was younger, but it's still happening today. And like I said, I'm 33. It seems like in most instances they kind of stop caring about you after a while. I've been abducted within less than a year. Like since I learned of abductions. That one's kind of a little on the fence. The big one that kind of like sold it to me in my mind is, I recalled an instance when I woke up in a very unusual circumstance, but I couldn't remember how I got there. And we mentioned, or we talked about this some, about meditation. Meditation was like the ultimate tool, how I came to a lot of these conclusions and how I deal with my anxiety. Is I meditate, and I meditate often, virtually daily. And I find it extremely relaxing. It's one of those, like, if you can really get into it, it feels very, very good.
What are your best times for you that you meditate?
When I'm either on the spot if my anxiety is flaring up, or if I just have some spare time and it's like a quiet moment in the house, and I'll be like, what, I could probably meditate right about now, and that feel pretty good.
How long do you usually meditate for?
At least 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
Sometimes I can lose track of time in a meditative state if I'm really, really in it. I can go up to like 45 minutes sometimes.
Because I like to hear other people's stories, because I can't meditate, and I try, but I know I need to just do small steps, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. So I'm still trying. But I'm sorry. Go.
Yeah, no, you're good. I could talk hours on meditation alone, but through the use of meditation, I basically went into a session like, okay, I had this one weird experience. What happened? And I meditated on it for quite a while, probably about half an hour. And at one point, it all just kind of clicked. It came to, and it started with a light. But I do have, and I guess I didn't really explain this in the pre-shooting this, but I did pull up on Google Maps a couple of things to basically, if you wanted to follow along with the story as I explain
Absolutely.
it.
If you want to share anything, please do. People love to look at stuff while you're talking. Well, so if you want to do that, that's fine.
I'll set the stage real quick before I share my screen. But I grew up so the story takes place, I was 17 years old. I'm 33 now, so I don't remember the exact year, but I just remember I was 17 at the time, going to college. I was homeschooled, so I graduated really early. I graduated when I was 15. and I started working on my degree immediately. And I was coming home summer classes, which they ran later since they're more condensed. And the school closed at 10 o'clock. Eastern Shore Community College closed at 10 o'clock. And I believe this was a Wednesday in the summer. And it's a clear night. It's not quite a full moon, but it's coming up on it. So the visibility is very high. So much so that, like, you could turn your headlights off and drive. The light pollution where I used to live is very, very low. And at the time, here, I'll go ahead and switch it over to, you'll have to pardon my flags because I don't really know how to remove those on Google Maps.
No problem.
But this is obviously the United States, Virginia. I lived on, if you can see this little peninsula here, this is the eastern shore of Virginia. This is Maryland up here. So this is 2 counties of Virginia that's not connected to mainland Virginia. You see we have the Atlantic over here on the right. I lived on the bay side of eastern shore of Virginia. And this is really the middle.
In that area too, right?
In Wallops there is.
Well, okay.
Yeah, which is up just south of Chincoteague, Wallops Island. There is.
Many people like to connect the military bases to lots of sightings because, of course, people think that there's a lot of underground UFO bases with the military bases, but that's something else.
It'd be a little hard out here because of the sea level, but they do a lot of R&D out there. That's another place I could talk a lot about.
I'm talking deep underground military bases. So.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm sorry. Please go ahead with the.
So the town I lived in was called Anancock, which is Native American for fog. And there really is not much out here. You can see all the farmlands, and there's fishing, and like I said, Wallops, and that's basically it as far as work goes. There's a NASA launch site up there too, in Wallops, and that's where my dad worked. Hence why we lived here. So I lived just outside of Anancock on, let's let it load. This is Cashville Road here. And obviously, this just goes to show how small of a community I come from. This is the biggest town on the eastern shore of Virginia. And it's super tiny. So down Cashville Road here, this leads out to Cashville, which is where, which is an even smaller town. But off of Cashville Road is this road right here called Bailey Neck. And Bailey Neck connects to a very popular beach in Anancock, which is this beach here called Bailey Beach. And so my story, and it looks a little different now. There's a lot less trees. But basically the story goes, I'm coming off of Cashville, going down Bailey Neck. And there's a couple clearings here, but as you can see, there's a lot of trees along this road, and this used to be a dirt road. It's an asphalt road, not super wide. 2 cars can barely go past each other. And when I get about here, this is this turn Hicks Lane. Yeah, so this, you can see there's like a little cutout here. There used to be trees out to Hicks Road, and these trees are I looked these up. These are called loblolly pines. They're super tall trees. They can grow up to be 100 feet tall.
Oh, that's interesting that they're okay. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is what it looks like here. This is basically what the side of the road looks like. There'll be a 3-foot ditch that goes down, and you can kind of get an idea of what, and it goes back as far as you can see into the forest here. So it looks like that up to Hicks Road here. And then there's this clearing. So keep in mind, this is the middle of the night. This is probably close to 11 o'clock by the time I get there, because I got out late at 10:30.
And why were you out there again? I'm sorry.
Oh, I lived down here.
Oh, you lived down there. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I won't say exactly which house, but it's all from Bailey Beach Drive.
Okay.
Which is this dirt road
here. So you're on your way home?
Yeah, I'm on my way home. and it's about 11 o'clock at night. Almost full moon, high visibility. So I always slow down right here. I'm driving a 93 Jeep Wrangler, which was my brother's car, and we would always take, since it's during the summer, we would take the roof and the doors off, because it's like I'm driving in a t-shirt and shorts. It's 70 degrees out in the middle of the night. It's perfect weather. Super nice car to drive during the summer. And right around here, I always slow down because there's usually deer in this clearing, and they always run across the road to the forest on the left. So we always slow down and we check whenever we're coming home late at night, because they're going to be out at this hour. There were no deer out there, so I say, cool. So I start accelerating, and I go down, and I'm going down this road, and I'm right about here, right in front of this house. And all of a sudden above me, well, I didn't know at the time it was above me, but a light illuminates the car. And it's a yellow hued, it almost looks like sunlight. It almost looks like if you had those like a million lumen flashlights, just boom, illuminate the entire car. Like it's the first thing I notice is I see it on my arms, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. And I'm looking around the cab, and I'm seeing it like the seat adjacent to me is illuminated, and everything's illuminated around the car. And I start doing.
Quick question: when you looked and everything was illuminated, were there shadows? Did you notice?
I don't recall there being any shadows. Like,
because sometimes people report that it's like every molecule is actually a light, and there's no shadows. It's like they just look around, there's no shadows. But anyways, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was super unusual, exactly what you just said. I noticed at the time, because I was immediately looking in my rearview mirror thinking someone was barreling down on me out of nowhere. And but that wasn't the case, because headlights from behind cast shadows forward from the seats. And even things under, like I could see my feet, in things below me. I could see in underneath the dashboard. It was like you described, everything was illuminated. It wasn't all the same brightness. It seemed like brighter on my arms, for example. But it seemed like I was getting hit with something very, very bright. And I'm start doing this double take where I'm looking out into the clearing, and it looks like it's 11 o'clock at night with a full moon. It's super dark, and it's super clear. I can see the creek. And it's super confusing. And this goes on for about 5 more seconds. I'm trying to figure out what the heck's going on, looking at my car, looking at the trees, looking out here. And then all of a sudden, my eyelids in my head get really, really heavy. And I try to fight it as much as I can. I fight it for about a second or two. And the last thing I recall seeing is my lap as my head just collapsed in front of me.
And you were still in motion?
Yes, I was. Yeah. Which was why I was panicking and trying to fight it, because I'm driving a car, and like I said, there's a 3-foot ditch along both sides of the road. It's very common for folks on the shore to get ditched. And pretty much everybody has a 4-wheel drive car with a tow hook because of it. So I'm super panicking. So then I lose consciousness, and I wake up right here on Bailey Beach Drive on this side of the road. So it's kind of hard to see, but with these overlays on it, but you can see there's a road here, and there's a little section on both sides before you see this ditch. So I wake up at the edge of this clearing on this side of the road, right in between the ditch and the actual road itself. And I wake up in my seat, and I'm extremely disoriented. I'm I'm basically, it's almost like if you get up in the morning and you start like, getting ready to take a shower or brush your teeth, you're kind of in like robo mode, I like to call it, where you're just sort of doing things out of muscle memory.
Yeah.
It felt very much like that.
Did you have any pain or any sensations on your body or anything?
The only discomfort I felt was actually behind me in the seat, like in my back. And it turns out and I start reaching behind it to see what the heck it is, and I feel my seat belt is still buckled, and it's on my back, and it's uncomfortable, and I'm just like, this is unusual. I'm also noticing other unusual things, and for the record, at the time, I don't think any of this is unusual. I don't even recall seeing the light when I came to. I sort of I notice other things, like the car's still in gear and it's in like third or fourth. It's not in first, like how I usually park it. And the keys are in the ignition and they are to the on position. So like the car should be on and it's dead. And I just instinctively try to start the car. And it's not doing anything. Like the key's already rotated. So I'm like, that's weird. So I uncrank it, or whatever you want to call it, to the ignition, crank it again, and it slow starts. Like it really starts trugging, and then it starts. And then that's when I go to check because I'm holding the clutch down and I pull out the stick and I'm like, whoa, wait, what? Because it's not in first, it's in this unusual gear, like in third or fourth. And around this time, I notice it's early in the morning. The sun's starting to come up, and it's probably so this is where, and I don't think I've mentioned this when we talked before, but I have a very faint recollection because I'm super dazed during all of this. It's super hazy for me to try to remember exactly what I'm doing because, like I said, I mean, try to imagine like a specific day of you waking up and starting your morning and trying to recall things that happened literally seconds after you woke up. And this even felt extra heavier than that. But I recall looking over to this clearing area because I'm looking around and I'm looking across the beach here, trying to get my bearings of how the hell I got here. And I look up and I see a UFO over top of this clearing right here.
Actually, can you go to the street view? Grab that guy.
No, there's no street view out here.
Oh, okay. Well, I see the little guy. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so you kind of have to imagine. So these are 50 to 100 feet tall trees.
Yeah.
And I'm in this position here on the side of the road, looking almost due east, and directly above me is a UFO. And I took a little, and this is going to look super crude, and I mentioned before, but I see this directly above me. It's a saucer shape. It was round. It looked, I couldn't completely show the dimensions for it to what it looked like, but this is what I see, and I see this without any noise start going to the east over these trees. From directly above me, it just slowly creeps, and it's close. It's just above the tree line. But it looks exactly like this. These little lights here are supposed to be.
Should we see what you're describing?
Shoot, I forgot. I'm not sharing. Okay, so this is, like I said, this is super crude, but the lighting is actually pretty close to right. Like that's about what the color of the sky was. And it's about the color of the UFO itself. It's just we're looking at it from it's directly above us.
Wow.
And it's going out to the east. And It's doesn't exactly look like this. It's kind of hard to show this in 2D without like showing it. This little inner circle here is actually a protrusion from the bottom, and the bottom of the saucer looks, it's either completely flat or very slightly concave.
Okay.
But this protrusion here is this round, and it's sort of like extending out underneath it a little bit. And these little circles surrounding this big black hole in the middle are actually lights. And they're lighting like yellow, or almost like a slightly greenish yellow light. And I see this UFO go from above me to slowly creeping over this tree line here to the right, and it disappears from view. And I have the faintest memory of seeing this. This is something that I associate it with this particular event. And I'm sort of basically like a zombie while looking at this thing. And I sort of go, all right. And then I start my car and just drive on down the road like I'm going home. But as I'm coming across the bend here, I'm like, wait a minute, something ain't right here. And I realize it's like the sun's coming up, and I don't recall how I got here. So I go inside and I check the clock, and it's 4:15 in the morning. So, I got abducted about 11:30 at night, and I went almost a mile from where I got abducted on a different road. Like, in my mind, I don't know how I could ever, while unconscious, operate a manual transmission car around 290-degree turns while not getting ditched. It just doesn't make sense in my mind. So when I recalled seeing the light, it kind of just snapped in my mind. Like, okay, yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I got abducted. I don't see how else it can happen.
And this when you're 17.
Yeah, I was 17 at the time. And since then, I've recalled other incidents of, again, at this location, like waking up in very unusual circumstances. I actually remembered another incident where I woke up actually on this road here. I don't even remember the name of this road. It was unnamed as far as I knew. And there used to be a clearing here. And I guess they were planning on building a house. I know all these woods here because I was very bored as a child. And I woke up in the same car, so it must have been around the same time. I just randomly one night woke up in my car here. And this road, there's like there isn't a spot for you to turn around. So I had to actually put the car in reverse and back all the way out to Bailey Beach to drive home. And it was just another one of those where I was like, oh, this is weird. I don't remember how I got there.
Before you woke up, what were you doing before that happened?
I can't.
Really?
That particular instance where I woke up here in what used to be a clearing, I think they were clearing it to build a house, and I guess they never did. Judging from the looks of it.
But you woke up at, what time of day was it?
It was night.
It was night.
It was late. Yeah.
But did you go to sleep in your bed and you woke up in your car there? That's what I'm asking. Is
I couldn't recall. This is one of those where I haven't. I only recently relearned that one. There are other instances where I woke up in unusual circumstances, like in. I don't want to point out the specific house, but I woke up in my house here. Years after this is years later. I was going to college up in Maryland, and I was coming home for the weekend. My parents were out, so I was sort of just planning on having a chill night by myself before I go out with my friends the next day. And I woke up. It's during daytime, and I'm just sitting at home watching TV, relaxing, and I wake up laying on my back in my living room, in the opposite side of the room I'm in. I'm sitting in a couch, I guess I probably don't need to keep sharing my screen for this, but
Sure. I can hide it. You can keep it up if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I helps me see your guys' face when I talk. Okay, there we go. So that's that. So I woke up in like a T pose where I'm just laying on the flat of my back, arms to my side, and I'm on the opposite side of the room just saying, this is unusual because there's a big ass coffee table in between me and the couch. Like, what the hell happened? There was another instance, I talked to you guys about this briefly, where I only recently, this is like, they're starting to come to me now since I started to put the pieces together. I woke up, same house. This was actually probably before I was even able to drive. Same house. I woke up in the front yard, middle of the night, in my like pajamas, laying in that same kind of T pose in the grass in the front yard. And that's super unusual for me. I don't know how I got there. And I start walking to the front door. And that's sort of like in my mind, the most unusual thing yet is I'm like, why am I going into the house through the front door? Because in the house we're at, there's a garage and there's a rear entrance. And I almost always go in through the garage.
Is your garage always open? Because garage door?
I actually, I walked over there and I was like, this is weird. Yeah, I remember. So I'm walking up to the front door and I'm just like, why am I going to the front door? The garage is closed. The garage door is locked. And the glass slider in the back is also locked. Because my parents are kind of, well, my mom in particular is also kind of a very anxious person. So she locks triple, she's the person out there with their car lock going lock, 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 lock.
It's quite a bit of locks.
Yeah. So honestly, that I get a lot of my anxiety mannerisms through my mother. But so I go up to the front door and it's locked, and I'm like, oh crap, my mom's gonna kill me. And as soon as I say that, because I'm looking up to her room to see if her light's on, and all the lights are off in the house. And I'm like, Mom is gonna. Oh, they were a little strict at times, so I knew I was gonna get it. And as soon as I say that, I hear a clicking, unlocking sound, and both the deadbolt and the handle unlocked. Because I said, oh, that was a weird sound. And I go and turn the handle and it just whoop, pops right open. And I thought, I was about to admit defeat to my parents. Like, oh, sorry, I woke you up. Didn't mean to disturb you. And no one's there. All the lights are off. So I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Like,
there's our little dip into consciousness, because even after this probable abduction, they're watching, they're listening and watching, and they hear you fret.
And I got that impression when I was starting my car too, because like there was no power. Like the keys were turned to a way that the dash should have been illuminated, and there was nothing.
Oh,
I uncrank it, start it, and it slowly comes back up. Like the battery looked like it was dead. It looked like it went from a dead position to on, which doesn't make sense to me thinking back at it now. God, yeah, man, it's just
it's weird
like
because it just makes you feel like we all may be being watched at some point, but especially after an abduction like that, to just number one or both abductions, like you turn you crank the car, and of course the battery should be dead. No lights are on to show that the solenoids are on, whatever. And then with the other one, the door unlocks. It's just a wild thing to think about that they're listening.
they're listening, and I think that's why I was able to spot it. I'm pretty sure I saw it. I wouldn't say 100%, but that image I showed you is burned into my mind and is associated with waking up in my Jeep that particular morning. And I could, if I was a betting man, I bet it's like whatever their technology just straight up looks like magic to us.
Yeah.
Right. So they can start our cars. They can make us lose consciousness. They can pull us out of something and put us back.
Yep.
So it just straight up looks like magic to us. We can't understand, or we can try to understand it, but I feel like they were particularly lingering to be like, okay, is his car going to start? Do we got to, oh, Jimmy, push the button over there, make sure his car starts up. Okay.
Well, it's funny because it reminds me of a story that Jim Sparks told. You know, Jim Sparks, abductee. He told a story. What I'm going to get at is that they're lingering, and sometimes they aren't. I mean, especially if they've been here thousands of years, as they say, but they're still lingering because they still make mistakes. But Jim Sparks mentions in one of his where it was a mass abduction where before lots of people would be getting abducted and they'd come back home with different clothes on. And he mentions in one that there was a mass abduction, and after everything was all done doing what they did, there was some kind of, either it was telepathic or he was told to tell people, now everybody look around and make sure you have your clothes on. No one's leaving until they get the right clothes. And it's like kind of like, I don't know, that lingering thing makes me think that, you know, they're not perfect either. So they kind of have to linger around to make sure that they
get sloppy. They get sloppy. That's actually, so one of the, so I've been trying to come to terms with this, and I'm like, you know, my inquisitive mind is saying, well, what can I do to catch them, and what can I do to try to mess with them, or to try to help solidify this phenomenon in my mind anyway. So I got a sleep tracker. Basically, it's like a Fitbit little device that I use to monitor my sleep. Well, I didn't pay much mind to it when I got it, and I just got used to interpreting how it measures my sleep and sleep schedules and sleep patterns.
And how are you wearing it? Is it on your finger, your wrist, or?
Oh yeah, it's just, I can just keep it on my wrist.
It is a Fitbit. Okay.
Yeah, this one's a little different from the one I was using at the time, but it was a Fitbit. Yeah. And so I'm lying in bed, and this wasn't too long ago. This is less than 6 months ago, I would say. And I'm having a dream at the time, and then that dream cuts to a very different feeling dream, a very like I go from weird normal dream sequences to I can't see anymore, but I can feel and I can even hear, and it feels and hears very, very real, to the sense that like I can feel that I'm not wearing any clothes, and I can feel the floor of my bare feet, and I'm being walked somewhere, and then the walking stops, and I feel two hands, much smaller than my own, at an angle like they're reaching up on both shoulders, help me, like I'm being helped sitting down into what feels, you know, again, I'm naked, I can feel the whole thing. It feels like a bucket seat, almost like like I describe it a lot like a suspension roller coaster where it has a cage that you rest in with a little concave spot that the strap that comes down and latches into it. Feels like I can feel that concave around my leg. Like there would be a cage coming down over top of me, but none does. And at this exact moment where I'm sat into the chair, I realize I have some conscious ability and some control not just awareness of what's going on. And I try to talk, and I'm saying, but it's coming out weird, like not. It doesn't sound like I'm waking up from sleep. It sounds like it doesn't sound groggy. It sounds twisted, like it's not making any kind of sense. And as I'm doing this, I realize my physical mobility is being restricted because I'm starting to be able to move now. And I notice at this particular time, my biceps feel like I'm pinned to something like this, like in a T pose at the bicep level. I guess like here, like I cannot move this no matter what, which it's weird. It doesn't feel like there's something. It doesn't feel like there's a leather strap or anything there, but I can't lift it up. But I can move my forearm. So I notice I can move my forearms, and I start, panicking, and I'm trying to make sense of what the heck's going on. And as I'm doing this, my hand bumps into something. And with my left hand, I bump into something, and I reach out and I grab it. And it feels like almost like a coarse, like a canvas. Almost like what you would use to paint on. It feels like that, but it's stretchier, like a jumpsuit or something, or like a
leggings or something. The elastic kind of Yeah,
it's stretchy.
Spandex of sort.
Yeah, like a spandex but coarser. And so I grab it, and I'm able, from this position, I'm able to easily maneuver it to in front of me. But again, for whatever reason, I feel like I'm doing this with my eyes, but I'm not seeing anything. Of course, I can't reach my face to test it, but I feel like I'm wide-eyed and my adrenaline's pumping.
Wow.
And I can't see a thing.
Yeah.
And I think I caused a bit of a fuss, and I'm trying to talk to whatever this thing is, saying, I just want to talk. I think I'm saying I just want to talk over and over again. But I don't know if it's coming out right. It started. I'm getting more and more control with each split second that goes by. So I'm starting to sound more and more clear. And I hold this thing, and I realize I'm actually laying down now from the angle in which this thing's gravity is pulling it this way. So I'm at laying down like this. So I'm lifting it up like that. And I try to pull it in front of me like this, and I get to about here, and I hit something, so I can't keep pulling it in front of me. But my head's turned, or I can't turn my head now. It feels like there's something across my forehead, but it doesn't feel like a strap. I can't move my head up. So I'm trying to talk to it like this, like saying, I just want to talk. I just want to talk. And I feel a couple hands just do one of these, and it flips away from me because I'm just using one arm. My other arm's pinned too. I don't feel anything over here. And then all of a sudden, I feel something that I can only describe as like a cone shape go, like, pierce the back of my head, deep, like almost into the middle of my skull. And I can feel, I hear the sound of it resonate in my skull from it puncturing it. And I feel like it almost sounds like it's squeezing something, like sticking something into my head. And I don't know how to describe the sensation. It's disconcerting and very unusual, I would say.
I am disconcerted and feeling unusual right now.
It had a very tactile feel to it. The tool felt like a smooth metal, but I didn't feel any pain whatsoever. I just felt pressure from the force that's keeping my head in. My head wants to recoil to whatever this thing is. And as soon as I hear and feel that pressure, I'm out. I wake up in bed, feel totally fine, and I say, that's unusual. And I check my sleep monitor, and it says I wasn't in bed for 45 minutes. which is unusual. I thought it was just a dream. Like, man, that dream felt real, let me tell you. And I checked the monitor, and I wasn't in my bed for the past 45 minutes. So I was like,
No,
nope.
your monitor says you weren't in bed, but if it's a Fitbit, doesn't it just say you weren't sleeping?
It said I was awake.
Yeah, it said you're awake, because I just want to make sure we discern that it's not showing that you were out of your bed.
Yeah, well, it basically lost track of me. It lost track of me. It wasn't able to see my heart rate.
Okay.
Any of that stuff. It was like I took it off for 45 minutes and put it back on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of have like a few comments because it's actually like a really interesting story.
Yeah.
So the first one, I've always been a component for, I guess you could say, the non-physical abduction, where some of these abductions actually might not necessarily be physical. And I think your situation might be good evidence where there's some type of technology they have where they can actually replicate physiology. They can replicate something in whatever environment or whatever area they are, where you can just be sitting in your bed and normally you could have a partner next to you. There wouldn't seem like anything's happening. Even like Whitley Strieber has like described things like that. But in reality, something very advanced is happening somewhere else. And there's actually like a correlation. It's a technology. And I would lightly describe it as some type of consciousness technology.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned too, and to kind of go back on that point where really this idea of like the dreamscape or like lucid dreaming, we have a lot of assumptions in literature where this is just like in a realm in our head, where I'm really starting to see myself and a lot of other researchers and even ufologists are coming to this conclusion where that realm actually is real. And even though it may be different, it is a type of reality, and things can actually affect you in that realm in physical states. So I had an experience years ago where it was very similar. Started off like a normal dream. All of a sudden I'm in a different environment. I'm more aware. There's like more feelings, kind of how you described. And all of a sudden my vision, black. Like something like physically moved my eyes. But it was more like a pressure. And I couldn't open my eyes. Like I was completely lucid, and I could feel like these hands like doing something over my body, and just, it's like I had my perception, but it's like limited. And it's like a technology they use. And even going back to your abduction on that road where, you kind of woke up all distorted and like disorganized, you just see a casual UFO, like, oh, all right, I guess I'll just go home. It's like, that's the technology where it's like they're blocking your normal reaction. You're almost like sedated. It's so, to me, it's some of the most fascinating thing is the psychology about the phenomena, which is why like Dr. John Mack is such a prominent figure, because he started diving into this amongst all the criticisms and controversy. But
the biggest thing about John Mack for me is he took it from a scientific standpoint. Like it started off as a scientific journey for him. It ended up as a spiritual journey, which is, great for him. He got a lot of closure that way, but he went in with a scientific, analytic approach of, well, shouldn't we treat this condition? Shouldn't we address this condition? Because it was getting rejected by all of his peers. And he just took it from a subjective standpoint. Shouldn't we subjectively look at this condition and see what the causalities are? What's the relationship? What's causing it? Root cause analysis. And I love him to death because he took that approach. You could say like he was pretty open-minded about that. Like, yeah, he ended up becoming the abduction guy, but that was because he was willing to just listen to people and try to help them.
Him and Bud Hawkins.
He's still getting criticized to this day.
And there hasn't really been somebody to pick up his mantle yet, to be someone so like academically renowned, and then kind of he was mainly, I think he was child and adolescence is what his previous research was at Harvard, and then he started doing that later in his career. And if he didn't have tenure, like it's just a shame the battle he had to go through just to keep his tenure, just to really find out.
It's a shame we lost him so early too.
Yeah, yeah. That was, that's just a tragedy. It's like you can't you can't make that up.
Maybe it wasn't just a drunk driver.
Yeah, I had this thought the other day that I would like to do a statistical analysis, the UFO researchers' cause of death versus statistical averages. Yeah, and I'm actually afraid to. Yeah.
I mean, people have done it, but I can't say people have done it, but people have definitely looked into it. I mean, it's kind of like watching the end of the documentary 0 Point with Mark McCandlish. They name, I think, 4 or 5 scientists or physicists who were going to go to their conference and say, "Hey, I figured out anti-gravity, or I figured out free energy, or whatever." And he somehow fell down a flight of steps before and other people suddenly got brain cancer. It's just strange things that go on, but yeah, we could speculate all day on that stuff. But yeah, it's a strange occurrence, but
I keep trying to tell people dead man switches. Nowadays with cloud storage, dead man switches.
Oh.
Nowadays with cloud storage, if you really come across something dangerous, create a dead man switch. So if you don't do something once a day, your findings go out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I've not heard of that. So that's definitely a.
It's like when Assange was kind of in like the embassy for a few years ago on WikiLeaks. There's like a lot of stuff about the dead man switch and things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of. Yeah, that's like a whole nother.
Yeah, that's a different thing.
But yeah.
Well, where were we? So that's right, Adam. You were talking about just their power of over our consciousness, and we were wondering about whether it was a dream or not. And I actually wanted to add to that as well. In that Deirdre, one of the other experiencers we interviewed. Most of her experiences are actually she gets pulled out of her body and they work on her energetically, and that's one thing that's interesting. And then on the other hand, there are also different sources, like say from the ETs themselves. Like one of my favorite sources is the LL Research, Don Elkins, and his research with Carla Ruckert and Jim McCartney, where they did the raw material. I don't know if you've heard of that, Kory, where in 1981, they had learned for 2 decades how to channel. So they were channeling different beings here and there and everywhere. Okay. And finally, there was one channel that came together called the Ra channel. And Ra was this billions years old social memory complex that was just trying to give them the law of one. The law of one being the universal law, we're all one, and it goes deep. But one of the things, what he does, he gets really interested in he's very interested in the archetypes of the tarot, so he wants to know about the tarot, but through that, for 4 books, and sessions for 2 years, lots of other things are questioned and answered, and one of the things about contact was I believe it was in the law of one. It could have been some of their other contacts, but it was just that contact can be made in dreams, and they said, well, one of the prime ways we make contact to teach you or give you information is through dreams as well as meditation. So when I hear stuff like that, I think of that because I must say, they say they're a bit different than the Greys that are doing all this, as well as some of the other species that are doing these abductions. But them being higher beings say that they do that through dreams and meditation. So that's what comes to mind when I hear that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say we're at an interesting point in time with our technological development and our understanding of consciousness. It's getting better and better. I'm sure you've probably seen articles of MIT researchers able to record your dreams
Oh, no, I don't know if I have. I think I may have heard of that. It sounds
Yeah, a
familiar.
couple interesting things, and they've actually expanded the same technology to the point where they can record what you're thinking in terms of like if you think of an image, you can actually record that digitally and reconstruct it. It doesn't look perfect, but
Right.
it's one of those. It's actually kind of crazy because you can think of a memory, and you can of like, let's say you walk in your dog, and you can actually see real time feed. It's actually measurable. Our brain emits a 6 hertz wave signal, and it's measurable what you can do. You just have to know where to look for it in what area.
Hearing that technology just makes it even more suspect when it comes to listening to the insiders and stuff telling us that back in the 50s that the military had this technology. It's because
I believe it.
Because some of them, like just over the last few weeks, I've been watching a video by Andrew Bashago, who claims he's not a time traveler, but a jumper, or he was in the program where they were testing doing Tesla teleportation. So Nikola Tesla came, and that's another thing in ufology is you find out real quick that Nikola Tesla's technology that he was developing back in the 20s and 30s, or all his life, I should say,
1800
has rocketed forward the military's technology with particle beam weapon consciousness and apparently teleportation as well as time travel. But when when you're telling me stuff about MIT saying they can almost put it on a screen, what you're thinking just makes me go, well, then that makes it sound like what this guy's saying from the 50s and 60s is true. I mean, and that's all the information, that's all the secrecy that's being kept from us.
Yeah, it unlocks a lot of doors. I'm a realist, so a lot of these ideas and concepts, I kind of just have to go off with, I mostly just rely on my gut. And stuff involving Tesla happened so long ago, it's really hard to kind of make heads or tails of a lot of it.
Sure.
I will admit there are a lot of technological advantages that we could have that we're not using, or they're just not publicly circulated.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like we've had the ability, like I remember as a kid, my older brother has ADHD, and he was getting this new type of therapy called something feedback therapy, biofeedback therapy is what it was called. And I saw him get his session when I was really young, and he had this device attached to his head that's measuring his brain activity, and he's sitting there on a computer playing solitaire. And I'm like, and this is in the mid 90s, and I'm like, what? Nowadays, you can go onto Amazon and buy a headset controller for less than $100.
Yeah,
that just plugs right into the USB port in your computer, and you can use it instead of your mouse or something.
Yeah.
It's unreal. We've had this technology for a while.
Yeah, and it again, like I said, when you see the stuff that is coming out, then it just makes me think, okay, these guys may not be just pulling stuff out of their butts about the military having this 60 years ago.
And just like an example how like naive we still are in terms of like neuroscience and really understanding the brain and consciousness, like even in the late 90s, early 90s, pretty much just the 90s in general, when they did like EEG research on meditators, they didn't find any difference. And let me rephrase that as like habitual meditators, like monks, gurus, things like that. They didn't find any differences in EEG brain frequencies in comparison to controls. Jump about 10, 15 years later, 2004, 2005, they did the same exact research. The equipment was updated, and they're seeing crazy differences. And that's not that much amount of time.
Interesting point about that. Oh, I'm sorry.
We're getting there. And again, EEG work, and I did some master's work in a neuroscience lab for my graduate. And when I was talking to the neuroscientist there, she was really just saying there's not much consistency in EEG research across the planet in terms of the machine, the analysis, the amount of nodes, all these other little things. So, and again, to end the point, we're really only getting data on the neuron as well. And in my perspective, where the real stuff is happening is the microtubule, the small little tubes of DNA, which we can't really measure those frequencies. They're way too small. So we'll get there, I think, in time. But I think sometimes the species likes to think we're a lot smarter than we are. But we're getting there.
It takes time.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes so long. But one point I did want to make that was interesting, when MIT published their findings about being able to record dreams, they actually found they had to mentally train themselves a specific way to record them while they dream, while they sleep, which I thought was interesting, because you think you would just get it, right? If it's a signal, right? If I, pull up my antenna and I try to catch TV waves, you can adjust the antenna a little bit to get a little bit better signal, but that's me physically adjusting my receiver for a wave. How do I have to change my mental process to enable a digital receiver to get a better signal? Like that, to me, that's me thinking and actually changing a tangible result because of it. So I find that very, very intriguing. And I think there's something to it. Honestly.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say. So this is where, like, I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm a security engineer. I'm a professional hacker, and I've been doing it pretty much my entire life, ever since I wanted to figure out, how the heck does this thing called a Game Genie work for my NES? And I begged my dad to take me to computer shows to find out. I've been in the hacking community ever since, and one of the things that kind of sparks in my mind is they're able to do something similar. And when I say they, I mean the Greys or aliens, whoever's in that saucer that does whatever they did to me, where they can just turn your consciousness off as a light switch. And it seems like I'm only able to come to when, like, maybe the batteries are running low, or they are off by a certain degree from my head or something, and I'm able to, fight back.
You outsource the protocol. I do believe the human consciousness has the ability to transcend some technologies that they use, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's possible, because in the instance where I was driving my car and I actually recall losing consciousness, I was fighting it for a lot longer than like it takes for me to lose consciousness, because I don't even remember losing consciousness when they knock me out. Because that's why it seems like everything that they do, like, there's a pattern to when they come and they take you, when you get abducted, and it seems like everything they do is to protect themselves. And it makes sense when I think of me in a stupor. I'm able to lift up one of them with my offhand without even breaking a sweat. I'm like a silverback gorilla to them. Like, I mean, I'm kind of a big guy, but that's like, apples and oranges here in terms of physical differences between them. And that's something that, like, it makes sense to me. If I was in their position, if I was Mr. Brainiac, I would have every stopgap in place to prevent me from causing them harm.
Yeah.
Because we seem to be less evolved than them. Like, it makes sense that when we talk about the Greys and we look like we look similar, it seems like they are a much more evolved version of us, that they just don't have the physical characteristics. It seems like they have just enough strength to move around and hold their head up, and that's kind of it.
Well, yeah, we can go off on that. Like, I mean, I've read other abductees and insiders or such say, well, there's also about 7 or 8 other humans on other planets similar to us, but we're but genetically everybody's been messing around for millions of years anyway. So that's why we always say they look so much like us, but it maybe should be turned around, like we look like them, but also depends on the ET species we're talking about. But yeah,
it's hard to tell because we still have evolutionary traits like that. They had to have been evolved. Like a good example of this is our ability to smell smoke. You know, that's like our most recent from our hunter-gatherer phase. You ever wonder if you're driving down the road and you can smell smoke miles and miles away? Is because of that we evolved those traits, because those hunter and gatherers need to be able to smell smoke to smell food, and that was somebody cooking food. That was at the time when we had to cook our food to eat it and to digest it. So those traits we still have from our evolutionary period. So we definitely evolved from something. You know, I like to joke about it, like my lizard brain freaks out anytime I get scared from like an insect or a snake or something. There are traits embedded in our DNA that stuff like that just proves it in my mind that we evolved from something.
Yeah, I think years ago they've when they used to call the extra DNA, they didn't know about junk DNA, right? But now they're starting to say, well, maybe it's not junk. I think that there's a lot more to it than they know.
Yeah, I think they say it's not involved in coding the cell, I guess is what they say.
Okay, so we have gone over the hour, but I did want to still touch on anything in your early life. I mean, now, again, you said just over a year and a half ago, it's all been kind of coming out. And I guess, again, we know so far, you haven't seen the ETs. You just believe that they are grays. Is that correct?
A lot has happened to me in my lifetime that it's hard to make heads or tails on a lot of this stuff. All the stuff I've told to you, I'm like locked in my mind as like, this is pretty convincing to me. There have been other instances where I think I've seen things, but it's so close to me being in bed that it could be a dream, could be real. There's one particular instance where I think I saw a silhouette of one in my kitchen when I was sleeping on the couch. Woke up, and the reason I'm not completely convinced on this is I've had sleep paralysis before, but I'm usually not able to move. In this particular instance, I was able to move because my couch faces away from the kitchen. For whatever the heck reason, I woke up late at night on my couch. I fell asleep watching TV, and I turn and I look, and it looks like there's a silhouette of a very, very short person in my kitchen. And it almost looks like the silhouette, he's holding something in his hand. And the way the light is glistening off of him looks like he's almost naked. Or he's in a onesie or something. And the next day I had my girlfriend walk in the same spot, and my girlfriend's pretty short, and whatever it was there was shorter than him. But it could have just been sleep paralysis. I don't know. So that one's still out for the jury for me.
Go ahead. Sorry, finish your
thought. I was
thought.
just gonna say I've had other dreams where I felt like they were communicating to me, but it could have just been a dream.
Well, that's interesting though. What were they communicating to you, or do you remember?
Well, this one's interesting because this one has a lot of the hallmarks for it to be an abduction, but in the dream, I recall flying and hovering and getting busy with multiple women. And while this is happening,
that must have been a dream.
Yeah, it must have been a dream. And while this is happening, an alien is actually telling me that he's an alien. And he's just interested in me and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm a little busy right now. Can you come back later? And he's like, yeah, I just thought I should let you know. And he's not quite being this polite. He sounds and I can actually see him. He's like peeking out like, hey, like Clippy is, when you're open a new document.
Well, now
And,
I'm picturing you hovering in the air with
Yeah.
women.
with women.
And he's peeking out from where?
I don't know. Like the a side
I
of
need to
something.
get a visual.
Yeah, I'm not like up in the clouds. I'm like flying through maybe a big complex, like almost like a construction site or something, and he's like leaning out from behind a pillar
Oh, interesting.
on the ground to talk to me. And I'm not that far from him. I can see him.
Yeah.
He's this tiny little gray looking dude, and his mouth isn't moving, but I can hear him in my head. I can hear him crystal clear, like over the women. And he's talking to me, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool, man. Can we do whatever that is you want to do later? I'm having too much fun with this. And he's just like, yeah, I just thought I'd let you know. But he basically sounds like a robot almost.
Like a robot?
Yeah, just like monotone.
Yeah.
Finish up for.
I mean, that's basically it. It seemed very real, but I'm familiar with lucid dreaming, and I've lucid dreamed before, and I've put myself in that scenario minus an alien in a lucid dream before. So, that's like.
So, what I will say, from my experience and what I've dictated for myself, my brother, and other experiencers, they will use dreams to mask an abduction or like an experience. So, kind of what we were talking about before, it's very professional, it's very empirical, it's like almost like a research study up there. To an extent, we actually had an experiencer who pretty much described almost like child and adolescent psychology they were doing on these abducted children. But before I digress too much, they'll use dreams and scenarios, even sometimes lucid dreams, and kind of mesh it all together and almost like overlay your perception or your consciousness during what happens to them. And it's interesting how you said like a factory setting. That's the number one. Well, that's like one of the places for me. It's usually where I know like something's happening to me or something's energetically off or something. Big factory setting, or almost like a giant like military scape. Those are like two things I've noticed they've used for me. And you mentioned too briefly, like during that experience when you're taken in the Jeep, the haze, it'll be hazy. It'll be like almost like a normal dream, maybe even lucid, but then there's this weird other haze, this other perception that's like influencing things. So it's really tough to tell, like, is it a normal dream or is it this but it's up to the individual. And that's what to me is the most challenging, but also the most liberating part of the phenomena, if you can kind of dive into yourself and figure out what's actually going on. And to end that point, there is also like a big genetic sexual part about abductions as well. And one of our I guess one of the original people we're going to have on this podcast, she actually has done a lot of work on sexuality and like abductions and things like that. So it is a very common theme. So I don't know, they're researching something. I don't know what their research, everybody's different, but they like to test, and they like to test people psychologically, physically, and the whole 9 yards, but you never know.
Well, I'd also say that it's quite possible, like Adam was saying, they mesh it together, and it's quite possible it started as a dream, but maybe there was some kind of a abduction, and maybe you were getting busy with women, but they weren't. It was a screen memory. They may not have been humans. They could have been. Could have been machines. I don't know. Machines.
So there's something to do with, and this is a very common recurring theme, is collecting sperm from men and eggs from women. And what are they doing? I don't know. I've had to come to terms with all this, because we're sitting here talking light of it, but this is some heavy stuff for most people.
Yeah,
for most
absolutely.
people.
And as you're saying that, sorry to interrupt, but I will definitely toss out the Extraordinary. The Seeding is an excellent documentary on Prime. I think they came out with a new one too, but Extraordinary The Seeding, if anyone out there is watching that is just getting into this and hasn't seen it, I absolutely say to watch.
There's a lot I'm gonna watch and read after we're done here. I'm still learning. This is an information pool that has no bottom.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, there's so much, and what Tesla's name was on that? What's the sub?
I haven't actually read it myself.
Physics, Tesla's ideal flying machine, and the conspiracy to conceal it. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because he like theoreticized a flying saucer. I don't know, when he was a kid. I think he was like barely a teenager, maybe just in college, and he was like bringing it to his like professors and was like, "Hey, I think I know how I can make something like this work." Yeah. This is like 1800s, so it's the idea is not new. The idea is not new.
No, I mean, shoot, they even talk about, they being some of the ufologists talk about breakaway civilizations as late as the 1800s, where they were working on stuff that Tesla had started out, but not connected with Tesla. But anyways, that can go somewhere else. And well, we're almost at an hour and a half, and I still wanted to ask you about your mom. I don't know if you've ever seen The Appointments of Dennis Jenkins, but it has Stephen Wright in there, and he's like uncrinkling a thing with his psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is Mr. Oh gosh, the English guy who either way, he's just sitting there just like watching him, and he uncrinkles and says, "Why haven't you asked me about my mother?" So I wanted to ask you about your mom.
Yeah. No, we can get through these pretty quick. Her story is nowhere near as long as mine. It's basically, she's seen UFOs around the time I was born, actually. I wasn't even a year old. My mom was having difficulty sleeping and was wandering around the house at like 4 in.the.morning. And this has happened. This was in Illinois. And she just happened to look out her window at the time and saw up close, looked like a saucer above the neighbor's house. And this is late at night. So she sees the silhouette of it, and it's illuminating and spinning, and there's red lights rotating as it's sitting there spinning. So she sees that. Most recently, when she lived in South Carolina, or was it North Carolina? God, I can't remember. I get those states mixed up sometimes. Yeah. Anyway, so she's woken up in her car at like 5 in.the.morning without any idea how she got there. Very similar to mine. It seems like they come and get you when it's safe, or they get you to come to them somewhere safe.
Yeah.
Or like my story in my Jeep, it's just I'm calling it a crime of opportunity. I just happened to be, and you saw the picture, in this extremely remote location late at night on my own. And they probably said, "Oh, well, he's due for a checkup. Let's this is a great time to go get him." Yeah. So it seems like it's one of those, and it's kind of scary when you think about it, because it's like, if you can be at home and you just say, "I'm going to go for a drive," beep boop, I feel better knowing if they have that kind of power over us, but I still think, therefore I am, then I think we're good. I think they're scientific, whatever it is they're doing. Like I said, they're doing their thing. Okay, we'll keep doing our thing. Yeah.
Well,
they're not.
It's also interesting in that the perspective of family. I mean, a lot of
it seems like it runs through
families.
Through families. Yeah, it seems hereditary.
Oh, and with your mom, how long ago did it happen? And do you talk openly with her about this?
Yeah, I talk with her about it, but she's very religious. So I try to explain to her. I'm like, hey, the fact that these beings are out here shouldn't really be a challenge to your faith, to your religion. You know, I grew up with my parents telling me that UFOs are the devil and he's trying to cause doubt. And I'm like, these things here shouldn't actually change. Like, there could still be your creator can still have created things the way that you think he did. And that these beings are just from somewhere else, either another planet or dimension. That shouldn't really change anything. Or they're genetically for modified versions of us. Whatever. It shouldn't actually affect you know, how things got started here. And so she's gotten a lot more comfortable with it, but she's very, very opinionated about how things should be interpreted.
You could have her read the Law of One, because every session starts, Ra says, "I am Ra, I've come to you in the light of the one infinite creator." So there you go. That makes every religious person feel better. So who knows? Yeah,
it's interesting.
It
I have my own take on religion, but I don't judge folks that follow spirituality. I'm kind of a by the book sort of person, although honestly consciousness, the evolution of consciousness is getting to a point where it's like starting to look you know, spirituality based. I'm still a bit of an atheist personally, and maybe I'm more agnostic now. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's totally understandable, because again, consciousness and the spirituality thing is it's overlapping as much as the phenomenon and paranormal. It's which I've been learning. It's like I've always kind of put them both on separate shelves, but now it's like, oh, the shelf is one, and they are very connected.
I've seen ghosts before, and it's sort of like with my own eyes, and I'm like, what was that? You know, like, what was that from a subjective standpoint?
Did you we're almost at an hour and a half, but I was going to say, when you see ghosts, has it happened throughout your whole life, or just once or twice?
Here and there, once or twice.
Right. Well, since we are at an hour and a half, I would say that we should probably just we should cut it off, and we'll just ask you to come back, because there's, I'm sure, still more to talk about. You're learning more about yourself and your past happenings more and more. So
we got philosophy we can talk about. There's like what are they thinking? You know, the aliens.
What we would like to do is just get a roundtable of all of the experiencers that we've interviewed, and just get everyone together, and also just go off on fun things, just to talk, just to have a good together. It'd be a lot of fun. Adam, any last words?
No, I think we're good. Thanks for coming on. Thanks a lot for really talking about your experiences. It's always great to hear another story and really get another perspective.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for doing this. I can't imagine the amount of effort that you guys put into this. And like you said, and like I've said before, this is like therapy to me. And this is also a message for anyone out there that is feeling these feelings and you don't know what to do with them. Feel free to reach out to us on Reddit, and or in the abduction subreddits. I check them all the time. So if you're not alone if this crazy phenomena is affecting you, or if you think you've been affected, there is a path to acceptance and a path to moving forward. It doesn't have to be all bad. The world's not going to end. Everything's going to be okay, I promise.
Yeah, and with that, I'd also like to say you can find Adam and I on our Reddit on UFOB. Join our Discord, UFOB Plus Experiencer Discord. I'm Polar Vortex on the Discord. Adam is Trimag. And what is your Reddit handle, Kory?
It's I'm going to type it out to you.
I'll put everything down in the description, but just
it's Frankie G88. But you can also find me on the abduction subreddits. Under
that name as well.
Yep.
All right. Great. Well, thank you again so much, and we will definitely invite you back.
It's awesome. Thank you.
All right. Take care, guys. Appreciate it.